Hi guys, thanks for joining me today. Today I want to just go through a quick edit of a photo. Nothing complicated, nothing long. Just stumbled across this one, thought it looked good. Maybe you've seen a couple that are similar, different angles, but I like this one. Anyway, this particular image was shot with a Nikon D90, as we can see here. It's a little old. It's November 18th, 2010, but it's still good. But as with a lot of your sunset shots, anything directly into the sun, you're going to see this really blown out sky. Even when bracketed, you still can get a little bit of that. So if you go down one, we're still blown out. If you look very closely, you can see how it's just blown out. There's no detail here whatsoever. And we can actually verify that by going up here to the histogram and looking at all the highlight clipping. It's 100% white. That means there's no data there, no recovery. So if we go down to exposure, we're going to see that this line, this banding line, haloing, all sorts of weird stuff is going on because the sensor just didn't pick anything up, and there's nothing there and nothing to work with. So one of the workarounds for that is to bracket even more. We'll take this lower shot. It's a little bit darker. I believe it's 2 stops under. We can see that there's a lot more detail in these clouds. So, with that said, what we want to do is we want to blend these together through luminosity masking. It's not as complicated as it sounds, and I'll give you we'll take this, go through this together and kind of see where we end up. So these are going to be our 3 shots. I don't think that we'll use this one. It's a little too bright. Maybe for some of the stuff down in here or anything into here, but we'll see. We might be able to just use levels. So we're going to take this and we're going to edit. The first thing we want to do in Photoshop, Lightroom, is to adjust the color balance. I particularly like a little bit more of a moody look, something along the lines of somewhere in this area. Bring the orange up a tad. I love this color, so we'll go ahead and go with that. Let's look at the sharpening. Zoom in here, look at the noise. As we zoom in, we can see across the edge of this piece of wood, this red line. That's chromatic aberration. It's generally caused by your lens. We can get rid of that simply by coming down here and checking remove chromatic aberration. So I'll click this. You can see it went away, and I'll go toggle it back and forth so you can see how it, and it's not always red. It could be a cyan color, more magenta, but nevertheless, this is how you get rid of it. So let's make the adjustments on one photo first, and then we'll go ahead and sync them to the other 2. So look at some of the sharpening. Bump up the sharpening just a little bit to get these a little bit more focus. A little sharper rather. Up here in the sky we can see some noise. We'll just take the luminance and bump that up a little bit. We don't want to go too much, just a little bit. And if we notice that if any of these are becoming more blurry, then we can use the masking tool, and that's simply holding down Option or Alt and just sliding it to the right, and you can see anything that's black is not going to be sharpened. So everything up here is smooth, and then we've got some sharp weeds down here. So this is our main photo. I think what we'll do before we do some, we don't want to sync these together because we have different exposures, so we want to do that separate. So I'm going to go down here. Make sure that you are on 2012 current. If you have an older version of Lightroom, you may only have 2010, but make sure you're in 2012. Bump up the blue primary just a little bit here. Starting to look really good. So we'll take this and then we'll highlight these three and I will sync them. And what that does, you can look down here, it colored balanced it all my settings that I did on this first image and applied them to the other two. So now that we are done there, we'll just take some of these sliders and adjust them to where we want. So this will be our main photo that we'll use. And then it looks like we'll probably end up using this for the highlights here. So we'll go in here and we'll see if we can make this look even a little bit better by bringing down some of these highlights here. And that's about as much as we want. So now that that's done, we want to bring this into Photoshop. The easiest way to do that, and normally when you highlight all three, normally what you do is you go to Edit In and then Open as Layers in Photoshop. However, we don't want to do that this way because we want to work in a non-destructive workflow. If I open up in Layers, it'll bring them in as just bitmaps, similar to like a TIFF file. And we can't go back and edit the raw if we do it this way. So what we want to do is open a smart object in Photoshop. The downside to this is it creates three separate documents and you just have to move the layers into each other, but that's an easy task for the benefits that you get from it. So we're going to take these photos now and just open them into to Photoshop, and I'll put it on pause until it's completed. Alright, now we've got our files into Photoshop. All three of them here. Like I said, they're separate, but that's fine. What we're going to do is, this is a trick to move this smart object into this 3098 from 3099. Highlight this on the layers, click this, and go to Duplicate Layer. From here, you can select the document. In this case, we want to move it into 3098. And now we've got it moved into here. So now we've got them into our layers. Now the first thing that we want to do, well, let me actually go back into explaining the reason why we chose the smart object. So let's say I didn't quite get this right. Maybe there's something I need to adjust. All I do is I double click into this and it'll bring up Camera Raw, and I can adjust it however seems best. So in this case, if I hit OK, it just updates. So we have two almost virtually same layers. So I'll go back into it. We can just undo it, or I can go back in and edit. This is non-destructive. It doesn't affect anything. So once it's done, I can completely continue to do that all day long, and it will not affect the original quality. So now what we want to do is we want to take what these highlights, and there's a couple. I'm not going to go into detail of how to create them off of channels manually, but there are plenty of tools to do it for you. There is one by Jimmy McIntyre, and the one I personally like is the TK Actions, and it just generates light masks. These are for luminosity. What we're going to do is we're going to only select the bright areas and mask those in. So we're just going to do all lights masks. We've got them here. So we have our lights, light lights, bright lights, all the way down to ultra. You can see right here that you can kind of see that banding. So I think what we're going to do is look something more along the lines of light lights. think that'll work best. If not, we can always redo it. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to mask out the top part into these areas. When I hold down Command, and that highlights these brighter areas, I would come down here and I create a mask. And just like that, you can see how much better this is. And I can toggle this on and off. You see that? So we have the benefits of the dark sky, or the darkened sun, and the other exposure. We've blended them by luminosity instead of, you don't get those halos. We can look in here, and now it's almost perfect. You can see the clouds have detail. There's a little bit of blown out here. We can fix that. I personally like when the sun comes through like this. I'm not going to fix this because I think that's cool. But let's say that we wanted to fix, I'll do the extreme. So I'll bring the exposure on this way down to show you what's going to happen now that I've adjusted it. It looks terrible. But we knew that would happen because it's no longer in the gamut of acceptability with the range of colors. So we want to match that as best as we can. So we'll bring this back up. Just kind of look at the details in here. Bring down some more of the highlights. And we'll see how that works. And now we have this very seamless transition between the sun. We've got all of this just in detail. If we disable this, we can see how it's just completely blown out. We've got our really strong haloing here. The edge is just not very good looking. So, and that's really, that's really how it boils down, is how easy it is. So once we establish that that's what we want to do, we can adjust this other layer just a little bit because it looks a little dark. So we'll bring up the exposure some more. And now that this is blended, let me just double check to make sure that looks good. And it looks good to me. I can see the nice sun rays up here. We'll play around with this a little bit. There's a way to fix this. It bothers some people. It's kind of like a final fix, and you can use that with one of the tools up here. I don't know if you've ever played around with it, but it's the liquify. It's really easy to fix that kind of like when the sun is just a big blob and it messes with the sensor in your camera. But anyway, we've got an image here, and now it's ready to do any other editing that you want to do. Now, there's something I like personally, and I recommend it to anybody, is the Nik Color Effects Pro. It's now a Google product, and I think it does a really decent job. So now that we've got, I always work in a non-destructive workflow. What that means is every edit I make, I can go back and edit it without destroying any part of it. So one thing that I always do is once I'm happy with this file, I will convert this into a smart object. So anything I apply to it means I can go back and edit it multiple times. I'm going to show you that just here in a moment. So we're going to convert these to smart objects. It might take just a few minutes. I'll put it on pause until it's finished. Okay, it's now in one smart object. You say, well, what if you want to get back to the other layers? It's as simple as double-clicking. It'll open up a new document with these two. You make your changes, save it, and it updates here, and you're ready to go. So let's talk about Color Effects Pro. I recommend it if I don't remember the price. I think it's dropped considerably in price since Google purchased it, but I think it's a good investment. I'll show you. One of the things I do is their dynamic contrast is actually, it's very nice. So I'm going to go overboard just so you can. Let's take something like this darken light and center. I like it, but in this case we're gonna just completely make it like this, and you hit OK. Under normal circumstances, you would not be able to go back and change this. You know, you're like, well, I've already made the change. Now I'm stuck with this. It's just way too dark here. Smart objects allow you to go in and edit and change them without actually being stuck, so it's non-destructive. So I can go back in here and change this. And it edits, it comes out exactly how you want. So it's a very nice way of doing things, and I advise anybody that is not familiar with layers and smart objects to really investigate. I think it'll save you a lot of headache. But regardless, let's go back into the Pro Contrast. This is one of the filters I really like. Just kind of brings out some of those, a little bit of a more of a unique contrast that you know, normally it wouldn't. You wouldn't be able to do this unless you really knew how. And I can show you how to do the exact same thing with layers, or excuse me, levels and curves. It just takes a lot longer, and the idea is to make this a quick edit. So bump this down a little bit. You don't always need to adjust the color cast. I keep it down low because that's kind of the color cast I actually want. Another thing is the skylight filter. Makes it just bring out some warmth to it. I'll bring this down just a tad. And I am pretty much happy with this photo. We'll go ahead and throw in this darken light and center again like we did before. Place the center here, but I'm not going to make it so. Let's make it a little bit less harsh. So we went from there to there just a subtle change. So we hit OK, and again I can go back in and change this as many times as I want, and it will cascade through. While I'm here, I'm actually going to prove that to you. So I'm going to take this, double click, and go into those original raw files. Here we go. I'm going to add a levels adjustment to it. So I'm going to make it very, very bright just for the sake of the demo. We're going to save this. It opens up as a PSB, and our original object is still the one over here. So once it's done saving here, you'll see it update through here. It'll actually redo these filters like it's doing right now. So it cascades down, and you can just make the adjustments without it being you know, tied into any changes. Okay, and that's pretty much it. That looks exactly like what I expected it to anyway. So we'll just undo that. But for the sake of showing you that you can cascade through, it's really what I wanted to show you. So I think we're basically done. There's a couple other things that you may want to, that we might want to do, and that's just purely preference. Like I think I might want to take a little bit of brightness into these weeds over here, and how we can do that through masking is taking the levels, bringing these up a little bit. Now, if you look, we brighten up the whole image, but that's okay. We're just looking right here and down in this area here. we'll take our mask and we're going to invert it, so now it's back to normal. So basically we're going to be painting through this mask to let some of this stuff through. And if you don't have a Wacom tablet or something similar, I would highly recommend it. Makes things so much easier, especially when painting. So take a brush, make it about here, 40% opacity. We've got white here. We're going to be painting white onto this. What's going to happen is I'll go 100%. You'll kind of see how it's brightening up only where I'm painting because it's letting that through. But I don't want 100%. I just want it subtle. So I'll take it down to about 40%. And I'll just make tiny changes. And then the same thing down here. I probably even want to darken that. I thought for a minute at the beginning I wanted that light, but I think we probably want to darken down here. So we can do the same thing except the opposite way. So we'll take another levels and we'll take it down dark. So like that. Same idea, invert it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to paint down here and darken that down just a little bit. Because our subject is really out here. That's really what we care about. We don't want to go black. I don't typically like to have any black or white in my photo. Just subtle dark grays, and you know, when you're dealing with sun, it's almost impossible. But for the or glares off windshields and that sort of thing, almost impossible. But that's just my preference. So I think we're about done here. There's one other thing I probably want to do, and up in the sky here it looks like it's a little bright. I want our focus to come down in here, so we'll take that same exact levels adjustment and just paint up through here, bringing that darkness down just a little bit. And if we go too much, we can always hit X and toggle it and bring it back up a little bit. So some finishing touches. I'm not going to bother showing you all the clone stamping, but I will show you a way to clone stamp and remove objects non-destructively. Normally you just do it straight on the photo. We don't want to do that. So we're going to take like this little weird thing in the sky. It's from the lens flare. So we'll go up to the stamp tool and we're putting it on a layer, a separate layer. We'll call it stamp and clone. We want to go current and below, so everything below this layer will be affected. So it'll take into account. Just like that, and you have it all in one layer. So if I decide that I didn't like it, I can remove the layer and start over. I'm not editing the main file. So that's one thing that might help you. Like this is probably needs to be taken out. Anyway, well, there's the photo. Go back to our original. So we took this and these photos and merged them into taken the sun and made it a little more moody and less bright, and you can now see details in the sky. I'll go ahead and fix this before I post it, but maybe just a little bit minor changes. But that's pretty much it. There's nothing to it. You just have to have a, I've never edited this photo yet. This is the first time. So you just kind of have to go what makes, what you remember the scene being and how you want it to, what kind of mood you want it to be. There's another thing that I might do now that I'm looking is some of the sun off this rock and off of the weeds here. I'd probably just enhance that a little bit by painting with the brush, but we'll let it go for now. But feel free to ask me any questions, and I'll be happy to ask, or excuse me, I'll be happy to answer them, not ask them. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you got something useful out of it. And we'll talk to you later.